Hey there, thanks for tuning in tonight and joining in on our time weekly of Midweek Encouragement. I appreciate you being here. I'm Ronald Rice, your host. I am the pastor of the Pentecostals of Salt Lake. Love to see you some Sunday morning at 11, Thursday night at 7. Come join us sometime and be with us. We'd love to get that chance to meet you. Tonight we're going to continue our journey to see Jesus the way I believe he was intended to be seen in the Gospels, from a first century Jewish perspective, first century rabbis speaking, teaching, training disciples, how they would have received it in that day, and in all of that, how that actually applies to you and me, and see what we can learn from all of this. It's been enlightening. Sometimes you run across things you have known all your life, and other times you're kind of scratching your head like, what? I didn't know that. How does that work? But at any rate, we're on the journey, and we're going to learn it, and we're going to enjoy the process. Please make your comments down below there in the comment section, and put some good positive emojis, some good words down there. Share the video. Maybe you want to start a watch party, depending on the platform you're on. Whatever, however you want to do that. Let people know about this time that we have together every week on Wednesdays at 7:30. So if you're watching later on, still make some comments and get this thing out there so other people can see. Our whole point is that everyone who wants to would have the opportunity to learn these things. But thank you for being here. It's great to have this time together. We are continuing our journey tonight, moving forward. We kind of ended a bit abruptly last week. I ran out of time. But we ended talking about the process whereby people are not immediately disciples. It takes time. They come in, and it takes time for somebody to become a disciple. Well, so Jesus, when he works on us, when his Spirit infills us, he works on us, but he doesn't change everything all at one time. You know that, I know that. If you've been working with and living with the Spirit of God inside of you, you know that he doesn't work on everything at once. He works on one area at a time, and things develop. And then when you're somewhat worked on in one area and you've made changes and developed, then he'll work with another area. He doesn't do the whole life all at one time. And so goes the process. We were working on John chapter 6, verses 26 through 29. And if you'd like to go back and check that out, you can. We were particularly getting to that point where the crowd had said to him, "What shall we do that we may work the works of God?" And Jesus says that this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent. So the understanding is this, of course. You and I as disciples, and people as disciples wanting to make disciples, it's not our job to fix people. Jesus does the fixing. Jesus did not send the 12 into the surrounding villages and cities and places when he sent them out to go and fix people. No. He sent them to go preach the good news. We need to be disciplined to just share the good news about Jesus and what he's done. For instance, the man who had a legion of demons cast out of him, when you're reading that account, you realize he became an instant disciple. What did Jesus tell him to do immediately after those devils had left him and he was now clothed and in his right mind? Jesus told him to go and tell everybody what happened to you. So the process began with that man to become a disciple and to be better and to be more what he should be over time. So he's beginning the process. Was he mature? No. Was he trustworthy? No. But was he in the process? And could he tell people what Jesus did for him? Yes, that's exactly it. He could tell his story. He would continue to develop, and later, no doubt, he would be filled with the Holy Spirit when that became available. And so he's not even fully born into the kingdom at this time, but he is following. The Great Commission, if you'll remember, starts with go, make disciples. Still, it was after that then that he said to baptize and teach. And so I want you to notice the order of those events in the Great Commission. Go, baptize, teach. Go, make disciples, baptize, teach. We need to make some space so that people can get on board and then be born from above. Now, people may not be on the highway yet, so to speak, but they're on the on-ramp. They're getting there. They're coming in. They're on their way. And we have to understand this is a process. It doesn't happen immediately, and we need to give people space in that process. So Jesus is working with this crowd, this multitude that had followed him, and the multitude itself, in general, they're not on board. And Jesus senses this. He knows that they're following, they're asking questions, but they already have their own motive. They have an agenda. They know what they want. And Jesus doesn't change his message to placate the crowd and give them just what they want. That's not what he does. And so they said, how are we going to work the works of God? How shall we do this? And Jesus said, this is the work of God. Believe in him whom he sent. What does Jesus want them to do to start this process? Believe. That's the starting point for a disciple. Believe. They don't have to know key verses of the Bible. They're not going to know all about the Old Testament tabernacle. They may not know who Moses was. They may not know the creation of Adam, and they may not know about the judges or the prophets or any of the deeper stuff. They're beginning. They don't even know the beginning stuff at this point. They just know that they want to know. So Jesus is saying to the crowd here, hey, if you want to do this, back up and start here. You have to believe first. You have to believe. And I want you to understand that this is the it that we've been talking about. And this is the it that grows when you're a disciple. Disciples grow as they increase their comprehension and awareness of who Jesus is. And that will continually grow and even explode on them over time. This is your walk with God. It's the recognition of who Jesus is. And if you can believe that he was sent by God, well, that's a good starting point. Believe. The original language of all of that indicates that you are putting your belief into him. Now that's the connotation there. Your belief has to be into him. So it's not enough to believe that Jesus is on the highway with you. Okay? No. Jesus is the highway. Okay? In fact, Jesus is the only way. There is no other way. When you get that, your issues stop. See, that's how anger issues stop. That's how lust issues stop. That's how pride and jealousy and envy stop. And it's not because you somehow discipline yourself. No. We are not disciples of self. And I'm sure you've heard the term self-discipline, and I understand that, and that's okay as far as it goes. But the truth is, I need Christ discipline. That's what I need. He disciplines me. Now, You can get all kinds of therapy from a number of different programs. There are abuse treatments and therapies of all kinds. And you can learn man-made ways of doing things. And I'm certainly not against any of that in so much as it gives some help and relief. But that's not what this is about. This is about a dramatic change that nobody can measure. And now, when this happens, other people notice. And they recognize, and they may even say, there's something different about you, because suddenly there is something different about you. You can't measure it. It is not something that's quantifiable. It is not seen, and it is unknown. But once you get it, you are now a disciple. And you are a disciple as long as you hang on to it. If I understand who Jesus is, maybe not intellectually, but I get it in my heart, it will start changing me. It is then that I realize that Jesus' life is the fullness of who I am. This is not a miserable, suffering Christian just trying to be like Jesus. That's not what discipleship was about in the first century, and it's not what discipleship is about now. This is not some sort of imitation club. It's not about conformity. I'm not going to dress up like Jesus and try to be like Jesus. No. This idea, in the first century, a disciple did not aspire to become like his rabbi. He aspired to become the rabbi. Now, what I'm talking about is the same sort of idea. This is where I become Christ in a way, where I put myself into Him and He puts Himself into me. This is not scientific. I can't show you a flow chart. I can't create some special graphic, and I don't have a picture. I don't have some clever image to try to illustrate this. It's something that happens, and when you get it, you begin to see it. And then you begin to see yourself through a particular lens. And truly, seeing Christ is seeing yourself differently. Well, let's keep reading here. We're still in John 6. Let's look at verses 30 through 35. John 6, 30 through 35. Therefore they said to him, "What sign will you perform then, that we may see it and believe you? What work will you do? Our fathers ate the manna in the desert. As it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat." Then Jesus said to them, "Most assuredly I say to you, Moses did not give you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is He who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." Then they said to him, "Lord, give us this bread always." And Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst." You have to believe. Don't forget that. Keep that in your head here. You have to believe. Let's talk about this for a minute. Let's unpack it. So Moses wrote that God was going to send Israel one that would be like him, to be a prophet and to lead the people. He said, somebody's coming like me and is going to do all of these. So one of the unique things about Moses in the Old Testament, particularly Exodus, is that he could do signs and wonders. He he would perform miracles. You know, had the hand in, it was in his vest or whatever, and he comes out and it's sick. He puts it back in, brings it out, it's healed. He throws his rod down, it becomes a snake. He picks it up by the tail, and it's back to the staff. You know, all of these things were key and important. And in verse 30 of what we just read, they asked Jesus what sign he would perform that they might see and believe. What's that all about? That's a direct reference to Moses and that prediction of the coming Messiah. What work are you going to do? What miracle, Jesus, are you going to perform here? You know, Moses, they said, he gave them manna from heaven, that bread in the desert. So what are you going to do? We want to believe you, but you have to prove yourself. We want to know that you are who you seem to be saying you are. And honestly, that's precisely what Jesus did not have to do. He didn't have to prove himself to anybody, anytime, anywhere. Instead, he wants us to come to him by faith, to believe. There are those moments where people came around because of what they had experienced or had seen, like Thomas later on, you know, when he declares of Jesus, my Lord and my God. He's kneeling before him because he has seen. But remember, Jesus also said how much better it is for those who have not seen than for those who have seen and yet believe. We don't need to see an angel, okay? We don't need to walk on water. We need to simply believe by faith. Not just that Jesus died and rose from the dead, but that Jesus died for me, and that it was my death that he took upon himself. The old me is dead, and the new me now lives in Christ. Now, I would be the first in line to tell you that there are days it certainly doesn't feel like that. But you've also heard me say, and I'll say it again, I refuse to live by my feelings. Your emotions will lie to you. You can't live by your feelings. So once you get this revelation of how this works, it completely changes how you handle sin in your life. Jesus died and rose for me. He took my death. I died to myself here. You don't have to keep trying to overcome the old you anymore when you get this. Why? Because the old you is not you anymore. It's not you because Christ is not like that, and you are in Christ, and Christ is in you, and so you truly have a new identity. All things have become new. You're not constantly worrying about trying to defeat sin. And well, why? Because sin is already defeated. And understand, it's not that you're suddenly perfect. You know me better than that. But it's rather that the sins that come up are quickly dealt with. And because you do that, because that is not your lifestyle any longer. And so if you have a mistake along the way, it's not out of habit. It's not something you do regularly. It's the anomaly. It's the exception. It's something that occurs and you realize it, and all of a sudden is, no. And you deal with it right there. It's something unusual, and it's quickly quashed. You don't let it linger. You deal with it, and you move on, because that's not you. That's not you. I best digress and get on with my lesson today. This crowd has followed Jesus, and they've come to Capernaum to find him. They didn't find him back on the mountainside, if you remember, back over on the east side of Bethsaida in the wilderness. And so they've come across here, and they're explaining to Jesus that they want to believe, and they want Jesus to perform some sign, some miracle, and prove to them that he is the one that Moses predicted. I mean, after all, and they reference this, Moses even fed them bread in the wilderness. Didn't Jesus just feed them in a wilderness? Right? That's what happened. And that's why they're still following him to some degree. And Jesus, he takes this moment and he corrects them. He reminds them that that Moses didn't give them bread from heaven. That's interesting. I mean, maybe they're talking about bread because they're hungry again. I don't know. It was yesterday at this point that Jesus had fed them in the wilderness, and so we're a day later. And even though he fed them with this thousands of people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, they're hungry again, and I guess bread is on their mind, and that's what they're bringing up. Maybe they didn't even bring food with them because maybe they figured Jesus was just going to do it again. And they're telling him, in essence, to do this again. So Jesus says, hey, Moses didn't give you bread from heaven. It's my Father who gives you true bread from heaven. And the next thing Jesus says here is really the theme and kind of the control for the rest of John chapter 6. We're going to see it. And in some ways, Jesus has hold of this illustration of bread, and he's not letting it go. I mean, why did Jesus use these illustrations? We use illustrations in teaching and preaching to enlighten and to try to help people relate and apply what the Bible says to them personally. And we try to do that through illustrating stories and what have you. But Jesus would use illustrations to kind of obscure what he was saying. Remember that phrase from the Psalms where it talked about dark sayings? Why would Jesus do that? Well, because Jesus wanted people to follow him who want it. He's not trying to populate a crowd. He's not trying to create a multitude and a mass following. Jesus is reaching for those who want it and will reach for it. He is trying to give enough information for those who really want to be a disciple to continue to pursue it, and yet multitudes who are just there for the extra stuff would not understand. So multitudes are all well and good. Don't misunderstand me. But multitudes are infinitely difficult to disciple. You have a difficult time trying to make disciples of a multitude. Jesus wasn't trying to placate people and build a huge following. Jesus wanted to make disciples. So, consequently, he's looking for those who were willing to become disciples. So, Jesus told them, hey, this bread of God you're looking for, well, that's he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And of course, they're not really grasping what Jesus is saying. And so their response is telling, Lord, give us this bread always. Apparently, they are still intent on telling him what to do. They've been telling him to do a sign, show us who you are. This is their agenda. This is what their designs are. They know what they want. And they're telling him what to do again. Give us this bread always. I don't want that kind of relationship with the Lord. I don't want this thing where I'm demanding of him things. Lord, fix this. Lord, heal that one. Lord, do this and do... I don't know how you pray. I don't know how you relate to God. I don't want that to be my relationship with him. I want to take my orders from him, not give orders to him. The crowd demanded signs and wonders. And then they go so far as to demand that he give them this bread he's talking about and give it to them always. In context, maybe they were thinking about the manna from heaven in the days of Moses. Manna appeared every morning and the people would gather it after the dew had lifted, and there's this white stuff on the ground, and they would gather it and they would make a bread or a wafer, or they'd make something. And so it's like they're telling Jesus to do that. They were demanding of him. And Jesus responded to them. I love it. He said, I am. Now, he could have stopped there. And it's like the whole story is controlled by what happened back in Exodus. Remember Yahweh told Moses from the burning bush to tell the people that I am has sent you. So when the crowd tells Jesus to give them this bread always, Jesus just says, I am the bread of life. Lord, give us this bread. He says, I already did. So Jesus is telling them, he's signaling his identity, but he's telling them that the bread they really need is standing right there before them. It was not the bread from the sky that they needed. It was the bread of life. And he that was standing before them is that bread. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. So keep in mind that this is all about faith. Faith is activated in your life when you have revelation. Once you see spiritually, that's when you believe. Because belief is spiritual eyesight. There are people who want to follow, but they can't see. And it's not that they're against Jesus and his kingdom. It's that they're blind and they need their spiritual eyes opened. Maybe you know what it's like. Have you ever been in a very dark room for a while and suddenly there's a bright light shining? Maybe you're taking a walk on a dark moonless night and you trip one of those motion sensors that turns on a bright spotlight, and this light comes on in your eyes. You know what I'm talking about? It hurts. In the same way, we don't shine all the brilliance of truth about God on someone who's never even read a single verse of the Bible. It would be overwhelming and painful. We would be better off lighting a candle. Maybe later you can turn on a lamp and then way down the road somewhere we get to the stadium lights. But if we start with those bright stadium lights, it would be very, very painful. I'm out of time. I want to thank you once again for being here today and joining us. We'll be back next week for more Midweek Encouragement, Wednesday night, 7:30. Please come and join us then. In the meanwhile, I want you to love God, love people, fast, pray, give generously. And now you go make a disciple.